Your resume is a joke. Did you buy this degree online? He said it loud enough for the entire conference room to hear. 10 executives, all watching, all waiting to see how I'd respond. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man he just humiliated in front of the entire leadership team was the son of the company's founder. And in 48 hours, I would inherit everything. Welcome to Untold Chronicles. This is the story of how one racist executive destroyed his career in under 5 minutes and didn't realize it until it was far too late. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments right now. And if you believe talent has no color, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because this story is about to get intense. I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why patience is the most powerful weapon. Let's get into it. June 3rd, 2024, 9:47 a.m. I sat in the lobby of Sterling Innovations, wearing my best suit. Navy blue, fresh haircut, resume printed on premium paper. 27 years old and ready to prove myself. This wasn't just any interview. This was personal. My name is Marcus Sterling, and Sterling Innovations? That's my father's company. But nobody knew that. Not yet. See, my father, Thomas Sterling, built Sterling Innovations from nothing. Started in his garage in 1985 with $500 and a dream. 40 years later, it's a $2.3 billion manufacturing empire. 15,000 employees. Facilities in 12 countries. My dad is a legend in the industry. But he's also dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months to live, maybe less. The doctors told us 3 months ago. And my father, stubborn as ever, refused to announce his illness. Refused to step down. Wanted to work until his last breath. But he made me promise something. Marcus, he said from his hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, before I hand you this company, I need you to see it for yourself. Not as my son, as a regular candidate. I need you to understand what our employees face. What our culture really is when I'm not in the room. He grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Go in undercover. Use your middle name, Johnson. Apply as a regular candidate for the junior executive program. See how they treat you. See who we really are when they think nobody's watching. So that's what I did. Marcus Johnson, Stanford MBA. 5 years experience in operations management. Stellar recommendations. Perfect credentials. On paper, I was overqualified, but I'm also black. And as I sat in that lobby, watching white candidates get called in one by one, smiling receptionists offering them coffee, I started to understand what my father wanted me to see. I waited 2 hours past my scheduled interview time. Finally, a woman appeared. Rachel something, HR coordinator. Marcus Johnson. She looked at me like she was surprised I was still there. Yes, that's me. I had a 9 a.m. interview. She glanced at her watch. It's almost noon. I know. I've been waiting. She sighed like I was inconveniencing her. Follow me. We walked through the executive floor. Glass offices. Modern art. People in expensive suits making million-dollar decisions. My father built all of this. And I was being treated like I didn't belong here. She led me to a conference room where 5 executives sat. 3 men, 2 women. All white. All looking at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Skepticism? Annoyance? Disbelief? The man at the head of the table was Richard Dawson, VP of Operations. My father had mentioned him before. Sharp guy, but old school. Watch him. Richard didn't stand to shake my hand. Didn't smile. Just gestured to a chair. Marcus Johnson. Have a seat. I sat. He picked up my resume, didn't even look at it, and tossed it back onto the table like it was trash. Stanford MBA, huh? Yes, sir. Graduated top 10% of my class. Top 10%. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Let me guess. Affirmative action admission. The room went silent. I kept my face neutral. I was admitted on merit, sir. My undergraduate GPA was 3.9. My GMAT score was 740, and sure it was. Richard leaned back in his chair. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, Marcus. We have standards here at Sterling Innovations. This isn't some diversity quota position. We need real talent. One of the women, Jennifer Park, head of HR, shifted uncomfortably. Richard, maybe we should. No, Jennifer. He needs to hear this. Richard looked directly at me. Your resume looks good on paper. Great, even. But let's be real. How do we know you actually earn any of this? How do we know Stanford didn't just let you in to meet their diversity numbers? My jaw clenched. I thought about my father, about his request, about seeing the company as it really is. This was it. This was what he wanted me to see. Mr. Dawson, with respect, my credentials speak for themselves. I have 5 years of proven experience in 5 years doing what exactly? Richard interrupted. Let me guess. Some made-up diversity position at a company that was afraid to fire you. Another executive, Tom Bradley, finance director, actually laughed. Not loud, but enough that I heard it. Richard continued his assault. Here's the thing, Marcus. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I can spot a resume that's been enhanced, embellished. You understand what I'm saying? Are you calling me a liar? I'm saying your resume is a joke. He said it slowly, deliberately. Did you buy this degree online? Because that's what it looks like to me. Jennifer stood up. Richard, that's completely inappropriate. We should end this interview. I'm not finished. Richard's voice was steel. Marcus, let me give you some advice. This company was built on excellence. Real excellence. Not diversity hires. Not affirmative action. Not people who got where they are because of the color of their skin. He leaned forward, eyes cold. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to pass on your application. But I'm going to do you a favor. I'm not going to report that you falsified your resume. Because I assume that's what happened here. Nobody with your background has these credentials legitimately. The room felt like it was spinning. My background. He didn't say race. He didn't have to. I stood up slowly, collected my resume from a table, looked Richard Dawson directly in the eye. Thank you for your time, Mr. Dawson. This has been educational. I'm sure it has. He smiled. Jennifer will show you out. As I walked toward the door, I heard him mutter to Tom Bradley, why do we even waste time with these interviews? I left Sterling Innovations at 12:37 p.m., sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. And then I called my father. Tell me everything. My father's voice was weak, but his mind was sharp. I sat in his hospital room that evening, still wearing my interview suit. I told him everything. Every word Richard Dawson said. Every humiliation. Every racist assumption. When I finished, my father was quiet for a long moment. Then he started laughing. Not a bitter laugh. A knowing one. Richard Dawson, he said, shaking his head. I hired him 15 years ago. Brilliant operations mind. But I always suspected, I always wondered if his old school approach was code for something uglier. Dad, he basically called me a fraud. Said my Stanford degree was fake. Said my resume was a joke. And what did you do? I left. Like you asked. I didn't tell him who I was. My father nodded slowly. Good. You passed the first test. First test. He reached for a folder on his bedside table, hands shaking slightly from medication. Inside were documents. Legal papers. Marcus, in 2 days, I'm announcing my retirement. The board meeting is Thursday at 2 p.m. I'm stepping down as CEO and chairman of the board. I knew this was coming, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. And you're announcing your successor, I said quietly. Yes. He looked at me with eyes that had seen 4 decades of business battles. But here's what Richard Dawson doesn't know. What none of the executive team knows. He handed me the documents. 6 months ago, when the doctors gave me my diagnosis, I restructured the company ownership. I transferred 51% of my shares into a family trust. That trust is controlled by one person. I looked down at the papers. Saw my name. You. Me. You, Marcus. As of last month, you own the controlling interest in Sterling Innovations. You just didn't know it yet. I wanted to tell you in person, not through lawyers. The room felt too small suddenly. Too hot. Dad, I can't. I'm not ready to. You're more ready than you think. He coughed, winced. But you needed to see what I saw. You needed to understand that the company I built, the company I'm so proud of, has rot at its core. Richard Dawson. Richard Dawson is a symptom. The disease is deeper. My father's expression hardened. How many other talented people has he rejected because they didn't look right? How many brilliant minds have we lost because executives like him are gatekeepers? He took a labored breath. Thursday, at the board meeting, I'm announcing my retirement. I'm also announcing my successor as CEO. The board already approved it. They don't know who it is yet, but they trust my judgment. You're naming me CEO. I'm naming Marcus Sterling CEO, not Marcus Johnson, the son they didn't know existed because I kept my family private. The Stanford MBA they rejected this morning. My father smiled, and for a moment, he looked like his old self. Strong, powerful, unstoppable. And then, Marcus, you're going to clean house. You're going to build a company I always wanted but didn't have the courage to create. A company where talent matters, where merit is real, not code for discrimination. What about Richard? What about him? My father's smile turned cold. He mocked the future CEO's resume, called a joke, accused you of fraud. I'd say his judgment is severely compromised, wouldn't you? I looked at the ownership documents in my hands, looked at my dying father, looked at the choice ahead of me. I want to do this right, Dad. Not out of revenge, out of justice. Then do it right, he said. You have 2 days. Study everything, every file, every complaint, every HR report. I've already had my assistant prepare the confidential records for you. Learn who Richard Dawson really is. He closed his eyes, exhausted from even this short conversation, and then show them what real excellence looks like. I spent the next 48 hours in a private office, reading files my father's executive assistant had compiled. What I found made my blood run cold. Richard Dawson had been VP of operations for 15 years. In that time, the operations department had hired 247 people. 238 were white, 6 were Asian, 3 were Hispanic, 0 were Black. 0. In 15 years, Richard Dawson's department had never hired a single Black employee. But it got worse. I found complaint records, dozens of them, all filed with HR, all marked investigated and resolved. Complaint number 1, Maria Rodriguez, 2019. Applicant claimed Richard made comments about not wanting people who don't speak English properly, despite being fully bilingual and having a degree from Columbia. Application rejected. Complaint number 2, David Chun, 2020. Applicant reported Richard asked about his real nationality and whether he understood American business culture. Princeton graduate with 5 years at McKinsey. Application rejected. Complaint number 3, Jamal Washington, 2021. Applicant stated Richard spent the entire interview questioning the legitimacy of his degree from Morehouse College, a prestigious HBCU. Asked if Jamal knew what real academic standards looked like. Application rejected. There were 15 more complaints just like these, all investigated by Jennifer Park in HR, all marked unsubstantiated, all closed without action, because Richard Dawson was untouchable. He'd been there since the early days, was my father's right-hand man, had built the operations infrastructure that made Sterling Innovations profitable. He could do no wrong, except he'd been doing wrong for 15 years, and nobody had stopped him. I also found financial records that raise questions. Richard had approved several large vendor contracts with companies that had connections to his family. Nothing illegal, necessarily, but ethically questionable. Millions of dollars in contracts awarded without competitive bidding. My father had suspected, had asked for audits. But Richard always had explanations, always had justifications. The board trusted him. Until now. Thursday, June 6th, 2024. 1:45 p.m. I arrived at Sterling Innovations headquarters 15 minutes early. Wore a different suit, charcoal gray, custom tailored. I looked like I owned the place, because in a few minutes, everyone would know I did. The board meeting was on the top floor. 12 board members, plus executive leadership. Richard Dawson would be there. Jennifer Park, Tom Bradley, all the people from my interview. My father's assistant, Helen, met me in the private elevator. Your father arrived 10 minutes ago. He's waiting in the boardroom. Are you ready? No, I said honestly. But let's do this anyway. The elevator doors opened, and my life changed forever. The boardroom fell silent when I walked in behind my father. Thomas Sterling sat at the head of the massive conference table, looking smaller than I remembered. Thinner. The cancer was eating him alive, but he sat straight, dignified, powerful. Every board member stood when he entered. a sign of respect for the man who'd built everything they now controlled. Richard Dawson stood at my father's right hand, his usual position, his seat of power. He glanced at me when I entered. No recognition in his eyes. Why would there be? I was just Marcus Johnson, the candidate he'd humiliated 48 hours ago. My father gestured for everyone to sit. Thank you all for coming on short notice. His voice was steady despite his condition. I know there's been speculation about my health, so let me address it directly. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I have, at best, a few months left. The room erupted in murmurs. Several board members looked genuinely shocked. Others looked like they'd suspected but hoped it wasn't true. I'm here today to officially announce my retirement as CEO and chairman of the board of Sterling Innovations, effective immediately. More murmurs. Richard Dawson leaned forward, trying to catch my father's eye. He thought he knew what came next. Thought he was about to be promoted to CEO. I've given this company 40 years of my life, my father continued. Built it from nothing, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But I'm also aware that we've fallen short in some critical areas. He clicked a remote. A presentation appeared on the massive screen behind him. Diversity statistics, employee satisfaction scores, complaint records. Richard Dawson's face went pale. This company, my father said, has failed to live up to its values in one crucial area: equal opportunity. We say we hire based on merit, but the data tells a different story. He clicked through slides showing hiring patterns by department. Operations, Richard's department, stood out like a sore thumb. Someone in this room has been systematically excluding qualified candidates based on race. Someone has been making Sterling Innovations less competitive, less innovative, less excellent by narrowing our talent pool. Richard shifted in his seat. Other executives were looking at him now. I discovered this pattern recently while reviewing succession planning. It made me realize I can't leave this company in the hands of the current leadership structure. Too much has been overlooked. Too much has been excused. He looked directly at Richard. Too much discrimination has been allowed to fester. Richard stood up, face red. Thomas, if you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Richard. I'm stating facts. My father's voice was ice. Sit down. Richard sat. Which brings me to my succession plan. The board has already approved my choice for CEO. Someone with the vision to take Sterling Innovations into its next chapter. Someone with the integrity to fix what's broken. Someone with the qualifications to lead. He gestured to me. I'd like to introduce my son, Marcus Sterling. The room exploded. Board members looked confused. Executive leaders looked shocked. Richard Dawson looked like he'd been punched in the face. I stood, walked to the front of the room, stood beside my father. Many of you don't know I have a son, my father said. I kept my family life private for their protection. But Marcus is 27 years old. Stanford MBA. 5 years of proven operations experience. Impeccable credentials. He smiled slightly. Though apparently, some of you think his resume is a joke. Richard Dawson went from red to white. He recognized me now. Marcus Johnson, I said, looking directly at Richard. That was the name I used when I interviewed with your team 3 days ago. Remember that interview, Mr. Dawson? Dead silence. You told me my resume looked fake. Asked if I bought my degree online. Suggested I got into Stanford through affirmative action rather than merit. And then you rejected my application because, and I quote, nobody with your background has these credentials legitimately. I pulled out my phone. Press play. My voice filled the boardroom. Mr. Dawson, with respect, my credentials speak for themselves. Richard's voice, dripping with contempt. 5 years doing what exactly? Let me guess. Some made-up diversity position at a company that was afraid to fire you. I'd recorded the whole interview. Every word, every accusation, every racist assumption. The board members' faces ranged from horror to disgust. I stopped the recording. That interview taught me something important, I said. My father wanted me to see this company as it really is. Not the values we claim in our mission statement, but how we actually treat people when we think nobody important is watching. I clicked through more slides. The complaints against Richard, the hiring patterns, the vendor contracts with questionable ethics. Richard Dawson has been a valuable employee for 15 years, but he's also been a liability. He's cost us talent. He's exposed us to discrimination lawsuits. And he's violated the core values my father built this company on. Richard finally found his voice. This is entrapment. You came in under false pretenses. I came in as a qualified candidate. I interrupted. With a real Stanford MBA. Real experience. Real credentials. Everything on my resume was true. The only thing I hid was my last name. You deceived us. No, Mr. Dawson. I gave you the opportunity to do the right thing. To evaluate a candidate based on merit. You chose instead to make assumptions based on race. I turned to the board. As of today, I'm CEO of Sterling Innovations. The board has already approved this transition. And as my first act, I'm announcing a comprehensive review of our hiring practices, our vendor relationships, and our corporate culture. I look back at Richard. Mr. Dawson, effective immediately, you're suspended pending a formal investigation into the complaints filed against you and the vendor contracts you approved. Jennifer Park from HR will provide you with the details. You'll be on paid leave until the investigation concludes. You can't do this. I can, and I am. I kept my voice level professional. You'll have the opportunity to respond to all allegations. This will be fair and thorough, but it will also be real. Security appeared at the boardroom doors. My father had arranged that too. Richard looked at Thomas Sterling, betrayal in his eyes. Thomas, we built this company together. You can't let him do this to me. You did this to yourself, my father said quietly. When you call my son's resume a joke. When you rejected talented people because of their skin color. When you forgot that excellence has no race. He stood, shakily, but with dignity. You're dismissed, Richard. Richard Dawson left Sterling Innovations at 2:47 p.m. that day. He never returned. The investigation took 6 weeks. I brought in an external law firm to conduct it. Wanted everything documented, objective beyond reproach. What they found was worse than even I suspected. Richard had rejected 127 qualified minority candidates over 15 years. Candidates who went on to succeed at competitor companies. Candidates whose talent we lost because of one man's prejudice. He'd approved $23 million in vendor contract to companies owned by family members and friends. Not technically illegal, but ethically compromised and against company policy. He'd created a hostile work environment where employees were afraid to report discrimination because Richard was untouchable. And he'd cost Sterling Innovations an estimated $50 million in lost innovation and talent. The investigation report ran 247 pages. I fired Richard Dawson on July 20th, 2024. For cause. No severance beyond what the law required. He threatened to sue. His lawyers sent strongly worded letters about wrongful termination and defamation. We sent back the investigation report. His lawyers stopped calling. But I didn't stop there. Jennifer Park, the HR director who'd marked 15 complaints as unsubstantiated, resigned when I asked her to explain her investigation processes. Tom Bradley, the finance director who'd laughed during my interview, was demoted and put on a performance improvement plan. He quit 2 weeks later. I promoted Maria Rodriguez, one of Richard's rejected candidates, to VP of Operations. She'd spent the last 5 years at a competitor, building an incredible track record. I hired David Chun as Director of Supply Chain. He transformed our vendor relationships and saved the company $8 million in the first year. I brought in Jamal Washington as Senior Operations Manager. His innovations increased efficiency by 34%. All the people Richard had rejected because of their race became leaders who made Sterling Innovations better. And I implemented new policies. Blind resume reviews, names, photos, and colleges removed during initial screening. Only qualifications visible. Diverse interview panels. Multiple perspectives evaluating every candidate. Transparent promotion criteria. Clear metrics. No subjective cultural fit judgments. Anonymous reporting system. Employees could report discrimination without fear. Third-party audits. Annual reviews of hiring. And promotion data by external experts. Within 1 year, Sterling Innovations' diversity improved dramatically. Not because we lowered standards, Because we actually applied them fairly. My father died on September 3rd, 2024. He lived long enough to see the changes. Lived long enough to meet the new executive team. Lived long enough to tell me he was proud. You did what I couldn't, he said 2 days before he passed. You had the courage to burn it down and rebuild it right. I learned from you, Dad. No. He squeezed my hand. You learned from your own experience. For being judged by your skin instead of your skills. That's something I could never fully understand, no matter how much I wanted to. He looked at me with those tired eyes. Promise me you'll never forget what Richard made you feel. Use that. Channel it. Build a company where nobody ever feels that way again. I promised. At his funeral, 2,000 people came. Employees, competitors, industry leaders. Everyone respected Thomas Sterling. But during my eulogy, I told them the truth. My father built an incredible company. But he also taught me something more important. Success means nothing if it's built on injustice. He sent me undercover because he suspected we had a problem. And when I confirmed it, he had the courage to change course. I looked out at the audience. Saw Richard Dawson sitting in the back row. He'd come to pay respects. Some of you may wonder why I fired Richard Dawson, a 15-year veteran. Let me be clear, it wasn't revenge. It was accountability. When you have the power to change things and you don't, you become complicit in the injustice. My father taught me that in his final months, and I'm teaching it to Sterling Innovations now. After the funeral, Richard approached me. I'm sorry, he said stiffly, for what I said during your interview. I was wrong. I studied him for a moment. He looked older, defeated. Thank you for saying that. But the people you really owe an apology to are the 127 candidates you rejected, the employees you dismissed, the talent you wasted. I know. He looked at the ground. I've had a lot of time to think, to realize. I became exactly what I always said I wasn't. A bigot. Realizing it is the first step, I said. What you do next is what matters. He nodded and walked away. I don't know if Richard Dawson ever truly changed, but I know Sterling Innovations did. Today, Sterling Innovations is thriving. Revenue up 34%. Innovation pipeline tripled. Employee satisfaction highest in company history. We're regularly ranked as one of the best places to work, not because of hollow diversity initiatives, because we actually hire the best people. All of them, regardless of race. Harvard Business School made us a case study. How Sterling Innovations transformed culture through authentic leadership. I was invited to speak at Stanford's MBA graduation. Told my story to 800 graduates. You'll face people like Richard Dawson, I told them. People who will judge you before you open your mouth. Who'll assume you don't belong. Who'll question your credentials, your intelligence, your worth. Here's my advice. Prove them wrong. Not by being twice as good, though you'll have to be, but by being in a position where you can change the system that created them. Because that's real power. Not getting hired despite discrimination, but dismantling discrimination so nobody else has to overcome it. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. Last month, I received a letter. No return address. Just 2 words. Thank you. It was from Maria Rodriguez, the woman Richard rejected in 2019, who I promoted to VP of Operations, who just launched a product line that generated $100 million in revenue. She didn't need to explain what she was thanking me for. I knew, because I've been there too, sitting across from someone who looked at me and saw skin color instead of credentials. The difference? I had the power to fix it, and I did. Richard Dawson destroyed his own career in 5 minutes. Not because he rejected a candidate, but because he revealed who he really was. He thought he was untouchable. Thought 15 years of loyalty meant he could say anything, reject anyone, maintain his discriminatory patterns without consequences. He was wrong. Here's what this story teaches us. 1. Your character is revealed when you think nobody's watching. Richard had no idea the Marcus Johnson he humiliated was Marcus Sterling. He showed his true self because he thought there would be no consequences. 2. Discrimination is expensive. Sterling Innovations lost $50 million because one man's prejudice kept talented people out. Bigotry isn't just immoral, it's bad business. 3. Accountability requires courage. My father could have ignored the problem, could have let Richard retire with honor. Instead, he forced a reckoning, even in his final months. 4. Real change requires power. It's not enough to be right. You need to be in a position to act on what's right. That's why representation in leadership matters. 5. Justice isn't revenge. I could have humiliated Richard the way he humiliated me. Instead, I followed process, documented everything, and let his own actions speak for themselves. If you're watching this and you've ever been underestimated, discriminated against, or judged before you even walked in the room, I see you. Your credentials are real. Your talent is real. Your worth is real. Don't let anyone tell you different. And if you ever get the power to change things, use it. This is Untold Chronicles, where hidden stories of justice finally come to light. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for stories of accountability and justice every single day. Comment below. Have you ever been judged unfairly in an interview? What happened? Share this video. Every share puts more pressure on companies to do better. Marcus Sterling's story isn't just about one racist executive getting fired. It's about building a world where talent is recognized regardless of who you are or what you look like. We're not there yet, but we're getting closer. One story at a time. I'll see you in the next Chronicle.